everybody, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I'm your host, Mary Katharine Ham. I'm here with my co-host, Vic Mattis of the Washington Free Beacon. We are still, like, two weeks now from the election, still dealing with aftermath of what the actual vote counts look like.
We're not really sure who won.
Who's actually going to the House and Senate. California is still valiantly counting them votes up there. Good job, guys. It's a wonderful operation you have on November 19th and 20th. We're just still at it. Maybe by Thanksgiving. We shall see. Dems also dealing with the loss and what that looks like and how they might remake for the future, while Trump's transition team is just slotting in people like fast. It's happening fast over here. So we will talk some more about that, what we like, what we do not like in these picks. But first, before all that, how's it going, Vic?
Hello, Mary Katharine. Doing just fine. Had a wonderful anniversary weekend. Kate and I celebrated 20 years.
Nice.
Decided
Wow.
to use up points, a lot of points, to stay in New York at the St. Regis Hotel.
Very
which we
nice.
love, but particularly great when you use points. And Kate was very smart about this because we're, checking in. You check in online, but I don't want to just check in line, use the phone, and then you never see the people. Mm-hmm. I want to make the appearance. Like we're
Obviously,
here
right.
with the whole thing. And the room.
Does that get you better service?
I think so. Just human interaction is a good thing.
Right.
Unless
Well, it depends which human, but yes.
And unless you don't
You
do
happen
well.
to be charming, so
Right.
it works out.
Well, I thought I was pretty good. And the very nice lady, I think her name was Sue, at the front desk. And it's the recently renovated hotel. And this is the hotel was built in 1904 by John Jacob Astor, who then has the famous King Cole Bar, and his picture is there. And of course, 8 years later, he went down on the Titanic. So It's very interesting. But this is his hotel. We go up there. It's gorgeous, Gilded Age sort of stuff. And then she made some joke, the front desk lady, and Kate replies, well, I've had to put up with him for 20 years. And just a little throwaway. And she goes, oh, is it your anniversary? And I said, actually, it is. And she says, well, what time is dinner tonight? And I said, later. And she said, well, if you could just hold on for a few hours, I think we might be able to do something special. I said, okay. So we were ready again using the points. So we walked around Madison Avenue, had some coffee, this and that. Phone rings. Oh, your room is ready. And we had gotten upgraded to the Astor Suite.
How nice.
It was lovely. And we had a separate, it has like a separate living room and a half bath. So that became my bathroom. And Kate could take over like two vanities, which is like the dream come true, I think, for many women. They just want to have two vanities.
One for her hair and one for her makeup.
For everything else, right. So really enjoy that. So hats off to the staff and the folks at the St. Regis for such a nice thing to do.
Very nice.
And we, going up Fifth Avenue, a huge crowd in front of Trump Tower. No protesters yet. A lot of tourists, people wanted to take pictures.
Oh, that sounds right.
Yeah.
The vibe shift is real.
The vibe shift is real because on Saturday night, there was a big UFC fight. So not the Mike Tyson thing, but it was a UFC fight. And Trump and his potential cabinet, basically, and Speaker Mike Johnson all came down or went up to Madison Square Garden to watch this fight. And you had people on the streets of Manhattan at night with MAGA hats. That's crazy.
Yes.
I'm just saying, I mean, regardless of where you stand on this, you would not have seen this before. And this is like, whoa.
I think this is a big shift. I want to say, so I've been watching UFC for a couple years, probably since 2018, 2017 or so. Okay. I enjoy it very much. And it's been based for a long time.
Yeah.
The UFC is full of fighters who will say all sorts of stuff. A lot of them come from former Soviet republics, and then will come to the U.S. and like scream about freedom and oppression, and like it's like good stuff, right? Like they're not big on the commies. A lot of these fighters come from places that have experienced communist repression. So there's that. There has been a pro-Trump strain in UFC for a long time with various fighters.
Dana White.
Dana White, of course, ended up endorsing this time and was at the RNC. I think the turn here, and I know that we've talked about this in the past, and we were concerned in 2021. I'm getting into politics without talking about my personal stuff, but I will do that. I'll loop back.
Yes, please.
But in 2021, you and I were concerned, and in 2022, that there would be no COVID backlash, that this was it.
Where's the reckoning?
Right, that there would be no reckoning. I think that this is a little bit of the reckoning.
Yeah.
And let me explain why. So Dana White was one of the few people who said in 2020, oh, you think sports is impossible? No, we're going to do sports.
Yeah.
And the UFC went to Dubai, paid for an island, called it Fight Island, and had fights. And Steve and I, desperate for sports entertainment, as everyone was, were glued to Fight Island.
Right.
And I am so glad that Dana White took that chance and took the heat for it and was brave about it, made it happen. The SEC also did the same thing. When people said the SEC is not going to play football, I was like, we'll wait and see. The SEC is going to play football. And everyone thought I was crazy. But those two organizations went first. Right. And when they went first, other people could go, just like Georgia went first, just like Florida went first. Dana White deserves every penny of the rewards he has reaped from this. And I think that there is a culture and a subculture in this country that sort of followed the arc of the UFC, being brave, going out and doing the work, getting annoyed with COVID draconianism. And here we are, where Dana White and Joe Rogan make a big difference in this election. Trump comes to the UFC fight. The GOAT, John Bones Jones, is there to defeat Stipe. They're both on the older side. So it was
married Katharine. Goodness.
John Bones Jones comes out, and in his celebration, does the Trump dance, hangs out with Trump, gives his belt to Trump at one point, who's like grinning from ear to ear.
Yeah.
And then thanks Jesus and says that that's like what led him to this point in his life. And I'm just like, this is different.
Yeah.
This is the anti-2020. We have arrived in 4 years at the exact opposite of kneeling in the NFL.
Yeah.
That's where we are now.
That is a total vibe shift.
Right.
You know?
And I think the thing that Democrats should worry about, and we'll talk about their attempts to reckon with some of this. Look, this is a very strange and new coalition formed by Donald Trump, as illustrated by the entourage that came with him to the fight. Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., Elon Musk, Jelly Roll. I don't think Jelly Roll was actually with him, but Kid Rock was.
Yeah.
An appearance by Jelly Roll. Mike Johnson.
Yeah.
Mike Johnson I love because he reminded me of myself. I used to be the good kid in a bad crowd. I'm like, I'll do D for you guys. And I was like, that's Mike Johnson right now.
Right.
Like, he's the kid who was definitely in the marching band uniform like 40 minutes ago, and now he's at the party after the football game.
Right.
That was me. But I loved that he could be there.
Yeah.
I don't know what happens to this coalition. I don't know if it holds together after Donald Trump exits.
I'm going to say no.
stage.
I think it's uniquely him.
But here's the problem for Democrats. That moment, John Bones Jones doing that dance, by the way, a bunch of other athletes have done that dance in celebration.
Some videos I've seen of it.
A lot of minority voters who should have been Democrats voted for Trump this time.
Yeah.
And a lot of those minority voters in Latino communities and in the Black community, and sometimes women as well, who are shamed for voting against their best interests by Democrats, are held into the Democratic coalition by the idea that they're not allowed to go elsewhere, that they're the only ones who might do that, that it's wrong of them and icky of them, and they'll get put down for it. A lot of them, when they see that, will go, oh, this is okay.
Yeah.
We're doing this now.
Right.
And that causes what they call a preference cascade, where people feel allowed to make a different decision. And that should worry Democrats quite a bit. Anyway, also, this is, to me, is like the McDonald's thing, where it's just like, I can't say no to this content. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah.
You can't make me hate this.
There was the photo that was taken on the plane on Trump Force One of Trump and the gang with McDonald's, and there's RFK. That's my Donnie Jr.'s in there, but it's the picture of RFK. That's the most shocking thing, because as you know, they haven't yet switched over to the beef tallow. I'm waiting for that. That'll be like the crowning achievement of the administration. But and he's holding it. He's like, I can't believe I'm doing this. You know, also unclear what to say. He's holding the box, RFK Jr., and it's unclear what sandwich. I'm assuming it was some sort of a chicken sandwich, something that's a safe bet for certain people.
He was hazed.
Yeah. Yeah,
he was made to eat
He was.
The
But, you know, when you
McDonald's.
talk about UFC, it reminded me of that time whenever they showed videos of like these SEC games and people were coming back and the comments, you're all going to die.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it
In
was
outdoor
like,
stadiums.
that was bizarre. And then the other thing was at the baseball stadiums where you had to have cutouts of fans and
the
stuffed animals.
SEC did that for a while, but
Man,
they came back
happening?
and they played, and the UFC came back and it fought, and I'm very thankful to both of those. I think those were cultural milestones that made an impact with people. By the way, you can see it with the SEC. A bunch of liberal, high achieving Northeastern kids. They don't apply to the Ivies anymore. They don't apply to these little liberal arts schools in the Northeast because those schools tortured students during COVID. And you know what didn't? The University of Georgia, the University of Alabama, the University of Florida. And they are all looking to the South for their colleges now.
A healthy college experience.
Yes. Just the normalizing of America. That's what we're doing, folks.
What used to be normal until the end of 2019. All right, Katharine, how are you?
Thanks. I had to go on that rant first.
No, I mean, look, I was part of the show already. We just covered that territory now.
See, that is sort of personal to me because I've enjoyed watching the UFC for a long time, and I'm glad it's getting rewarded for its bravery in 2020. I was out in LA. I was on Real Time with Bill Maher on Friday night. And actually, there was one point in that discussion where Dr. Casey Means was on as the main interview guest. And she's great Stanford trained doctor, although she notes that medical school didn't really teach her the things she needs to know about being healthier. And so she's written a book called Good Energy. It's about metabolic health. And she was on to talk about this. Now,
I knew that.
I basically agree with Casey Means about metabolic health and all the ways in which we could improve our food supply and all this, she's like definitely Maha vibe. Okay. I'm on board. Do I also eat McDonald's like once or twice a week? Sure. Yeah. Both. I'm both.
Hold on now. Wait. A week? A week? Wow.
Maybe once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Once every 2 weeks.
I'm less than that now, and it's very sad.
Yeah. Let's say twice a month. I probably have.
I think you're up on me. Go ahead.
The point being, we're on this panel, and it's like Bill Maher and Chris Cuomo and Casey Means and myself. And Maher says, like, well, the reason people eat this stuff is because McDonald's is delicious. And most of the panel is like, Chris and Casey are like, really? You think it's delicious? And Cuomo's like, he never eats it. And Maher's like, well, let me be clear. Like, I don't eat it often, but it is delicious. And he's like, the whole thing is people talking about how little they eat McDonald's. The camera cuts to me and my face is like,
guilty.
Do I tell them how much I eat McDonald's? And so I did chime in, and I was thankful that my branding has worked so well that a bunch of people told me that when they clicked on this, they knew that I would be the one that would agree with Maher. Like they were like, Mary Katharine is not going to sit there and not say that McDonald's is amazing. So I did chime in and say, okay, so it's obviously delicious, guys.
Particularly at 2 a.m. or whenever. It's the salt. The salt is so
Oh, my goodness gracious. Anyway, so that's where I made my presence known in defense of junk food on the panel
that
called
and
Healthy
edibles.
Folks.
That indeed.
Yes, we'll get to that. We can play that clip later when we talk about the transition pics.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so we went out to LA. I'm an old person now, so like traveling across the country just makes me tired. It makes my back hurt, Vic.
I got tired just using the Amtrak.
I know.
And that's
we're not adventurers anymore.
No.
This is not who we are.
Wiped out. The train is wiping me out.
But I did have nice accommodations. Steve came with me. We got to have a little adventure in LA. Saw my brother. Saw my niece play a little soccer game. Had some delicious Tex-Mex.
Yeah, like real.
It's
California
a Texas-inspired Mexican restaurant in California, but I feel like that covers the bases. And
it's the first time I think I had like real sort of California Mexican sort of food was when my sister and I visited my uncle and his family, and that was probably 1987, summer of 87 or 88. I think.
And were you immediately like, oh, this is
different.
Different.
It was different. Yeah. It was different. But LA was always ahead in the 80s in particular of that scene. As sort of a another cousin on, his wife's side took us out. He was young at the time, and we went to a place where they had falafels. And we just never had that before because that's, what I mean? We're coming from New Jersey, and the lady, we had yet to discover it.
Yep.
Which is like the case with a lot of foods. My mother would, she would used to call and say, "Have you ever had this thing called a panini? It's so good." And I'm like, have you had pad Thai?
This was me with Thai food.
Oh my
in the
gosh,
in the
what
early
is this?
2000s, and sushi. Actually, I had never had sushi until I went to LA on a spring break when I was like a junior in college, and I had sushi, and I was like, that is a revelation.
Yeah.
I enjoy that very much.
Yeah.
So
see.
West Coast adventures. I gotta say, those people are so spoiled out there with the weather.
Yeah.
My Lord.
I mean, that's the thing.
I went outside to eat breakfast one morning. It was about 65 degrees, and it was so sweet. They treated me like I was in the Arctic. They lit a fire. They brought me.
It was 65.
They brought me a cozy Afghan to put on my legs.
Oh my God.
While I ate my breakfast outside, and then Steve and I can just enjoy our breakfast without anyone.
Yeah.
Out there, because nobody's coming out in California in 65-degree weather.
No, it's freezing. What are you doing?
So that was a good time. He came for the taping of the show, although I make him sit in the back because it makes me nervous to have him in the audience.
You're afraid of getting the eye contact?
No,
You don't want to know he's there.
I can talk to 1,000 strangers.
Mm-hmm.
If you put 12 people I know in front of me, I get very nervous.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I can't even talk on the phone in front of people.
Well, yeah, it's this is right up there with your other anxiety, which is the ordering food.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Get started on that. It's a very Gen Z trait of mine. Like, pull it together, Meg.
Delivery or takeout? I don't know.
Write it down on a paper before you go. All right. I'm available for speeches, though. Yeah. Okay. Shall we talk about some news other than the rant I already went on?
Let's do it.
Alrighty, we have an update in Pennsylvania on the McCormick Bob Casey Bob Casey race, and the update is that Bob Casey, longtime senator from the state of Pennsylvania, has decided to end his career by trying to cheat himself into a Senate seat. I mean, pretty blatantly, and when I say pretty blatantly, I mean on camera. The people trying to do it on his behalf are saying they're breaking the law. This actually came up on Bill Maher's show too, because he said that Democrats never deny elections. And I said, he said, if Trump had lost, we'd be in Pennsylvania looking for phantom ballots. And I was like, well, funny you should say that.
Yes.
Let me tell you what's happening in Pennsylvania right now. So this is the Fox story on it. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled Monday that mail-in ballots with incorrect or missing dates cannot be counted in the 2024 election, delivering a victory to Republican Party officials as they moved to aggressively defend their narrow Senate victory amid a recount challenge in the Keystone State. In a 4-3 decision, the state Supreme Court reaffirmed, this is not the first time, its prior decision that counties in the state cannot count incorrectly dated or undated ballots, explicitly singling out boards of election in Bucks County, Montgomery County, and Philadelphia County, whom they said shall comply in all caps with the prior rulings of this court, in which we have clarified for mail-in and absentee ballots in their November 1st ruling. So the Bucks County in particular, I believe we have a clip of this, said, sure, the state Supreme Court said follow the law, but we're going to say nah.
We reject all three categories of these ballots.
Your motion is to reject or dismiss the challenges in this category in front of you?
Correct, yep.
Not going to second that, mostly because I think we all know that precedent by a court doesn't matter anymore in this country, and people violate laws anytime they want. So for me, if I violate this law, it's because I want a court to pay attention to it.
It's the idea that she has that, we're not going to follow precedent because the Supreme Court, and she doesn't say the Supreme Court, as in the United States, the Supreme Court, but that's what she's talking about. And she's talking about the Dobbs decision and in her belief, the ignoring of Roe v. Wade and years and decades of precedents. And this is why she says that we all know that a precedent by a court doesn't matter in this country anymore, and people violate the laws all that they want, right? And so she
free
says,
for all.
Right. And she says, if I violate this law, it's because I want the court to pay attention. So you're just basically admitting that you're going to be violating this law. Even the Washington Post called it, I believe the phrase he used was corrosive to democracy.
Yes,
It's
yes.
pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The New York Times, on the other hand, ran a
Oh,
headline on
boy.
it. In Pennsylvania, the election litigation continues, with a twist.
Ooh.
Is the twist that they're stealing votes?
Yes.
Just trying to steal a seat?
Yeah, I first saw Andrew Kaczynski, K-File, had flagged this about. No, seriously, guys, what's the twist?
What's the twist?
What is the twist? They make it sound, again, and I'm not the first person to be reminded of this, obviously, but it reminded me of M. Night Shyamalan. It's a twist. There's a parody of it on YouTube, but a twist at the end. Oh my gosh, he was dead all along. So I don't know what Senator Bob Casey's hoping to get out of this, if he really believes that they're going to somehow overturn tens of thousands of ballots. And so you're talking about the undated, unsigned, and misdated ballots. It's very clear. I mean, it's the instructions are there. Like you have to sign it, you have to do these things, and then you drop it out. So you just don't randomly find ballots and then just say it counts for one side or the other. I mean, this is what was driving Trump crazy, obviously, in 2020 during COVID, because of all the extensions and changes to the law and, people in power. And the Free Beacon actually covered this just the other day. It was Chuck Ross who did. That those commissioners, it's 5-2, 5 Democrats. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about the Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court is 7. It's 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans. The commissioners in question, Ellis Marsalia and Harvey, they are Biden and Democrat and Casey supporters. They've given money, they've attended rallies, and they're saying we are going to count these votes, obviously, in his favor. What's concerning is, at first, I think they said that the difference with 99% reporting in Pennsylvania was about 31,000 votes in favor of Dave McCormick. And then I last saw it was 21. Now I see it's 17.
Yeah.
But that's got to be it now because, they've gotten all the votes they could possibly get in Philadelphia.
And when in 2020 they're changing the rules in the middle of the game, it's like at least there's some sort of plausible reason you're trying to be more expansive, is that people are afraid to go vote.
Right. There were issues.
We're trying to preserve that. I still think it was
the pandemic.
Funny business to change things in the middle of the game. In this case, the Supreme Court of the state has been very clear. This is the law. This is the rule. And in Bucks County, they're like, oh, no, let's just see what else we can find. And then we'll intermingle them with everything else, because once they're intermingled, what do we do? But from almost the beginning of this and pre-recount, experts who understand which ballots were out were like, there just aren't enough blue ones or blue areas for him to make up this difference. And so it would take some real funny business to make that happen, which I think is what we were seeing being attempted here. And I'm a little surprised that Casey would want to go out on that note, driven by Mark Elias, the notorious Democratic lawyer, off this cliff for his reputation. And that Josh Shapiro was kind of like, he finally was like, this doesn't seem great.
Yeah.
But it took a while.
Yeah, he hedged.
Yeah.
And there was obviously a lot of pressure on Shapiro to say something, and people are saying this is hurting your chances. And 4 years from now, when people are going to go back to this, I can't imagine people, with everyone's memory these days and regarding how fast the news is.
Right.
I don't know how big a deal this is ultimately going to be.
Well, and in the end, he sides with the correct side, and he'll get credit for having done that, even if it took a while.
Right.
Not sure about Casey's rep.
No, I'm not. And here's my other question for you, Mary Katharine. The Bucks County commissioners, the court now says they're reaffirming their position on this, that you cannot count these votes, these ballots that are unsigned, undated, misdated. What's to stop them from saying, okay, thanks, we're just going to do it anyway? Because people were beginning to say do you remember certainly after the Dobbs decision with the Supreme Court and people getting so upset over the 6-3 domination of the conservatives when in fact, it's not often that the court rules in that fashion, but they were saying, well, why don't we just ignore it anyway? As in just chaos? not quite
the
sure.
rule of law doesn't matter if it's ruled against you. Shapiro said, any insinuation that our laws can be ignored or do not matter is irresponsible and does damage to faith in our electoral process. It is critical for counties in both parties to respect it with both their rhetoric and their actions. The rule of law matters in Pennsylvania. So McCormick will end up being the senator, but we're having to go through a bunch of funky stuff to get there. And by the way, the recount, which was officially triggered, right? If the margin's small enough, the recount's triggered. Yeah. I think one could do the math and say, I'm not going to get anything out of this recount, so maybe let's just not charge the people of Pennsylvania a couple $1 million to do it. But whatever, it's triggered automatically. But this business is not triggered automatically. This is a choice.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're not simply counting votes.
No, and they would feel the other way. I know they bring this up all the time. If the shoe were on the other foot, Trump would be wanting to fight this and contest this. But you know what? It goes both ways. If it was the other way around, the Democrats would have been like, this is, election denialism. They say this.
Do we have an update on the Stormy Daniels case? Because remember, it was sort of hanging over everyone's head that our first felon president, our first felonious American president, would be maybe sentenced.
That's
in the aftermath of the election. What do we have going on there?
Well, as we're taping this, Mary Katharine, the prosecutors, Alvin Bragg and his team, including the one fellow who used to work at the Biden Department of Justice and took a demotion.
Forgot about that.
Demotion to help run the DA's operations in New York.
Well, they nailed it.
Yeah,
they did great.
They got what they wanted, except for the election part. They have now just said that they would like to delay the case, to delay the sentencing. They didn't want to push for anything going on right now, and this was sent to Judge Merchan. Merchan then has to decide. Trump's team is going to file a motion to dismiss this case, considering now the president, he won the election.
It's just like written in the court docs, like, I am the president, period.
What are you wanting to do to the president-elect is really the question. So Merchan has to decide on that, and I don't know if that decision will have come by the time our listeners get this episode. But it's not a matter of dismissing the case for the prosecutors. They just want to delay it for, 4 years? Might as well. I don't know.
Might as well.
So, that's bizarre. And again, there was so much news going on. It's hard to remember these things, and we talked about it on our show. But we're talking about an expense mislabeled on a business ledger that until recently was considered a misdemeanor and now is considered a felony.
Yeah.
So, great.
The whole thing just feels so transparent.
Yeah.
Jack Smith, this, and although I think they had some facts on their side on the documents case, once you appoint Jack Smith without going through the proper procedures, once you have to admit that, Biden did something very similar over here, it all just kind of became muck.
Right.
And then they also just sort of tacitly admit it's nonsense because once it wasn't available to screw him over before the election, they're like, we don't care about that anymore. Moving on.
Moving on.
Do you remember 2 weeks before the election or 3 weeks before the election when Jack Smith's whatever was supposed to be the big October surprise? And then they realized it wasn't going to work and they were like, never mind, we're moving on to something else. That never mind is the part where we all know you're full of it.
Right. And it's probably, it's one of the reasons why a lot of Trump supporters came out there and voted for him because they saw this as nothing but lawfare.
Although somebody should keep an eye on the classified documents this time around.
Yeah.
That's like not moving back and forth between Mar-a-Lago and Bedminster, the Bedminster in New Jersey.
And same with Biden and those classified documents in that case. And remember, it was the ghostwriter. This whole story now, nobody really cares about these things anymore. But
oh well.
Okay.
So that's our update there. We have some stats and talk about Democrats sort of grappling with what this means, whether there's a realignment, whether that realignment sticks. One thing I've told liberal friends, and I'm on my friend Allison Rosen's podcast this week talking about it, is that if it makes you feel any better, although I'm not sure it should, but the people who moved over to vote for Trump are your voters historically. Like it's very hard to look at a historic amount of Latino support for a Republican candidate and say the problem is white supremacy. Right. I don't think that's the problem. So you got to look for something else, and they are attempting to look for something else. But before we get to the diagnoses, I think I was noting to you earlier that some folks are keeping an eye on what this is another part of the COVID backlash, by the way. There's a piece in Real Clear Politics by Daniel McCarthy called "Why Democrats Are Losing Tomorrow's Elections Today." The out-migration from left-leaning states, exacerbated by their very bad governance during 2020 and beyond, is going to result in electoral college votes for red states and possibly more congressional seats in those states as well, although gerrymandering will somewhat determine what that looks like. But California is on track to lose 4 congressmen and electoral votes. New York will lose 3, Illinois 2, while Oregon, Minnesota, and Rhode Island are each going to be down 1. Solidly Republican states will get most of the gains. So that means places like Florida, places like North Carolina, Texas, that people have moved to, if those places are governed well, as they have been by Abbott, DeSantis, in Georgia, Kemp, you're going to not California, you're Georgia, and you're going to have more electoral votes for Republicans in the future, and that mountain's going to get steeper for Democrats.
I mean, part of the question is the people who leave those other states because they don't like the way things are going, taxes are too high, crime, city services, whatever it is. Do they bring with them to these redder states those liberal sensibilities and then vote for Democrats and then wonder why suddenly they have, crazy people out on the street using the bathroom, the sidewalk as a bathroom, or do they actually then, at least if not for social issues and fiscal and other issues, vote conservative?
Well, I think Colorado went first on this, right? Colorado absorbed a bunch of California residents over many years.
Yeah.
And got California'd.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of conservatives still in the state of Colorado who are fighting tooth and nail and have a win here and there. But it's, I mean, they're fighting to just barely not have a supermajority for Democrats in the
It used to be a conservative state,
And then it was a purple state for a long time, and now it's basically a blue state. So I think other states have attempted to learn from that. DeSantis has talked a little bit about his philosophy on this when it comes to Florida, and when a business wants to move to Florida, they're not always like, oh yeah, we're going to woo this super high-end tech company with a bunch of lib designers and tech folks and blue hairs down, or not blue hairs, purple hairs. The blue hairs are already in Florida. We're bringing the purple hairs in. But they make distinctions between different kinds of industries and what that influx looks like. Is it super blue and urbane? Or is it like a manufacturing situation where you're bringing in more median voters? And you also, again, like I said, if you're a good governor and you have a good state that benefits from your policies, people might not just continue to vote blue.
That's the hope. And again, I mean, sort of writ large with the last election we just had, that sort of gave me hope regarding that people were like, well, things are in fact bad, and we're not going to forget what just happened the last 4 years, whether it be the economy or immigration or anything else. So perhaps at the state level, that would work, as opposed to, somebody who's very liberal or progressive coming into a state like Florida, looking around and saying, this place is way too clean. I need to vote for the other guy. So I hope that doesn't happen.
I think, we've talked about it on the show before, but a lot of these metro areas, and I'm glad that it does look like there's a backlash in some of them finally. Because places like Chicago, D.C. to some extent, during 2020 and into 2022, 2023, I was like, these places are committing suicide. I mean, this is an overt effort by the local government, or maybe not a conscious effort, but the hubris was so great that these places are so great that even if they make them terrible, people will continue to pay to live there. And I think a bunch of people were like, no, we will not. In fact, I saw that, I don't know if I mentioned it on the show, but in Chicago, Brandon Johnson, the very terrible mayor with 14% approval at this point, had a property tax increase rejected by the entirety of the city council. 0 votes.
Yeah.
So
those are not Republicans on the city
Those
council.
are not Republicans, but something is happening. There is a backlash here, and I think part of the long tail of COVID backlash is these migrations and what it's going to do to the Electoral College.
And particularly the District of Columbia, because of the massive federal workforce. At least up to this current administration, there's no mandate to come back from remote and working in the city. And as a result, the city hasn't fully recovered. And it's 2024 going into 2025. We were just talking before we went on air about the Charlie Palmer Steakhouse, which is on the Senate side, closing after, I think, 22 years. They can't sustain this. Nobody's down there in that area anymore.
They are not. Actually, I mean, when I'm in the city, I'm surprised it's as lively as it is sometimes. I do think because of federal workers, probably they escape some of the winds of the of these issues. But shall we talk about some of the ideological issues for
of course
Democrats? Let me play Peggy Noonan on Morning Joe, and then we'll talk about the Morning Joe Mar-a-Lago summit. Here's Peggy Noonan.
The Democratic Party was seen as 3 things, it seems to me. A, it was the party of the little guy. It was the party of the nobody. It was the party that was going to take care of people who were not protected in America. 2, it was the party of generous spending. They weren't too tight with the purse strings. They thought, spend the money, we'll make it up at the end. 3, they were the anti-war party by the 60s and 70s. Joe, it seems to me they have ceded that territory to the current Republican Party, to the Trumpian Party. The Trumpian Party, Republican Party, says, we are the party of the little guy. We are the party of generous spending. You think you guys can spend? Hold my beer.
Exactly.
We are the anti-war party.
Yeah.
So, Mika, if the Democratic Party was resting on these 3 pillars, little guy, anti-war generous spending, and that's all gone. And they seem now the party of an academic administrator at Brown University, not the little guy. And they seem more activist in the world. And they are only as big spending as the Republicans. They've lost their pillars. That means they either have to rebuild those pillars or find new pillars.
Mike.
That's how it seems to me.
Yeah.
So Alyssa Slotkin sort of echoed this. She is a Democrat who was running in Michigan and won.
Yeah, close race.
Close race, but won there. She said Democrats need to use the language of the assembly line, not the faculty lounge. Which I think is a nice way of putting that. Right. Guess where the assembly line guys are? At the USC fight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what they were watching. Well, Tyson and Paul first, and then the USC fight on Saturday. But I think Noonan basically nails this, and they did cede all this ground.
They did, and I've said this before. I mean, it's funny to see Bruce Springsteen, cheering and going really hard, endorsing Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and doing this thing about what's wrong with you people. And he looks at his own state, New Jersey, which had a very, very close race relative to previous presidential elections in terms of Trump versus Biden. And
make New Jersey purple again.
Yeah, no, and Dave Wasserman had a measurement about this, and it was the second biggest swing of any state towards Trump, the first one being New York, which was an 11.5% swing, and New Jersey was 10.1% swing towards Trump. So all those guys, the working class, heroes from Springsteen's songs, they're all Trump supporters now. You go up and down that coast. If you look at the map, even again, like I said, not just the South, which is solidly red, but parts of the North, Passaic County, even that's crazy.
And by the way, those pillars, some of them don't sound great to me, right?
No.
I'm not that interested in inheriting those pillars from the Democratic Party, particularly the spending one.
I was going to say the isolationism one, but
yeah. So both of those we can have issues with. I mean, nobody cares about spending. It's like voters don't care about it, so it's hard to have a party that cares about it. But Democrats still have to reckon with the idea that these were the ideas that a Republican Party ran with. My friend, who's the main college professor who nonetheless understands these things, called it Kamala Harris touring with the doing the warmongers era tour.
Yeah. That's actually very funny.
It sends me every time I hear it.
Yeah.
But he has a point.
Yeah.
This was a large part of your constituency that was anti-war, was more isolationist. And what do you give them? You give them Liz Cheney because they were trying to reach people like me.
That did not.
That was not a good play.
No.
No.
I think that the best thing for, as Noonan suggests, is finding new pillars. And I think those pillars for the Democratic Party could be Social Security reform, raising the age to like 70, muscular foreign policy and exporting democracy abroad. So, you're winning me. I'll vote for you, Anyway.
Here we go.
Yeah,
We're just going to switch sides.
Yeah, here we go.
Vic and I are going there.
You also really briefly, you talked about how, the other argument that was pulled from the Democrats was that, it's all these white people voting for Trump.
Yeah. It's not.
And when you look at, and what is their answer when you point out the, blacks and Hispanics? With the Hispanics, they sometimes get referred to as white Latinos.
I know.
They aspire to be white.
And then they also say that basically because there's not a specific, first of all, I would say that it's problematic and racist to be like, what, aren't you Latino voters mad that he wants to deport you? And they're all like, we're citizens, ma'am. Like,
yeah.
We actually care about
but you have
illegal immigration.
You look the same,
But they care about their safety. They care about illegal immigration. They care about these issues. But yeah, you can't just sort of say because Latino voters don't vote monolithically in the way that we wish them to, they count as white now.
Right.
That's
not okay. It's totally grasping at straws, and it bugs the hell out of them because they think about Starr County in Texas, which is, I believe, the most Hispanic county in the United States. They voted for Trump, and they're on the border.
There was one.
They've had enough. There
was one in California that was like an 86% Latino county that swung from, I believe, at its biggest margin was like a 42 plus margin for Hillary, and was a 1.7 margin for Kamala Harris. Like that's
not good.
That's murder.
That's not good. I mean, they have to. There's going to, the interesting thing with the blame game that's going on the Democratic side right now is, a lot of finger pointing that the wishful thinking from them is that it's really the Republicans. They're the ones who are at fault because lies, disinformation, they spread it, and we and the American people fell for it. When in fact, you're talking about, a presidential candidate installed and who did not win the popular vote for the first time since John Kerry.
Yeah.
I don't even know where I'm going with this anymore.
I can't even.
But no, I mean, really, there's a ranked choice issue here, and it's just not. I don't know about this. It just doesn't sound right.
Ranked choice, by the way, as a ballot initiative, lost a bunch of places all over the country, and I think that's probably for the best. Not because I can't intellectually see how it could work, but because of crap like this. Like, we just have to make a decision, guys.
And apologies, it's Austin Theriault is the Republican.
Yes.
That's who it was.
Yes.
Sorry.
All right.
Okay.
Can I play Joe and Mika?
Okay. This is.
Do you think this will solve the problem?
This is
Vic?
This is like Nixon going to China.
Here we go. Here's the big moment. This is what everybody's into this week.
Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful, he was upbeat, he seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we? 5 years of political warfare has deeply divided Washington and the country. We have been as clear as we know how in expressing our deep concerns about President Trump's actions and words in the coarsening of public debate. But for nearly 80 million Americans, election denialism, public trials, and January 6th were not as important as the issues that moved them to send Donald Trump back to the White House with their vote. Joe and I realize it's time to do something different, and that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
Well, embarrassing. This is so embarrassing.
Sold me on it. I'll tell you that.
This is so embarrassing. Why not? Because y'all called him Hitler fascist a week and a half ago?
That's right.
That's why not.
That's right. Basically, white supremacist,
Their
Nazi.
Their viewers are very upset about this, which I cannot blame them if you've been telling people for 8 years that this guy is a grave threat to American democracy, and then you go have Eggs Benedict at his resort with him. Yeah, they might be upset about that.
As Scott Jennings on CNN had said, Hitler getting a lot more meeting requests than I thought.
Now, here's the question. Look, okay. I actually think that part of the problem, huge part of the problem for Democrats is that they did shut themselves off from anyone who disagreed with them.
Yeah.
They decided that the way they were going to win arguments, as I said in my book in 2015, End of Discussion, co-written with author Guy Benson, convincing people to shut up is not the same thing as convincing them. And they had trained themselves to stop having arguments, to tell people that they were bad, icky, white supremacist, gross, amoral people. And that was how they were going to win discussions and win arguments. But it turned out people didn't go for that. They didn't go for that in 2016. And I think this is another iteration of it. And so on one hand, it's good not to wall yourself off from Trump.
Right.
On the other hand, this is so obvious what they're doing.
Right. I mean, so like on a couple levels here. One, I'm surprised they didn't gear, like they had to bring it up. And I'm surprised they didn't gear it as more. And Trump asked us to come down to Mar-a-Lago, and we gave him a piece of our mind, and that we told him just how awful he is. And then that's it. And yes, we did go to Mar-a-Lago, and we had a lovely dinner. But, instead they left it. It's Mika who gives that opening about things that they might have in common or restarting communications, and her bringing up her father, the late Zbigniew Brzezinski. And,
which, by the way, this isn't... Yes. International relations, guys.
This isn't SALT II treaty here. This is it's meeting Brezhnev. It's Trump. So there is that. But as you mentioned, for a lot of people, it's hard for them to process that they would meet the person that they said was Hitler. Ben Terris in the Washington Post did something, wrote a column similar to this about Biden welcoming Trump to the White House, and people are like, "What are you doing? You can't normalize this. This is disgusting." So.
Yeah. Sorry about the touchdown dances have taken care of the normalizing.
Yeah.
By the way, we've already normalized a president who wanders off from G20 photos.
Yeah,
he was like not in the G20 photo.
No,
have you seen this?
Very strange.
There's people yelling. He's behind a palm tree.
Yeah, he also went into the jungle after a talk. He went back into the jungle, like at the end of Apocalypto, when they're like, "Do you go to the ships?" No, we're going into the jungle.
Yeah.
So that was very strange.
So I feel like we've done some normalizing we shouldn't have done with Biden.
So
That one's not the issue.
And the other thing was MSNBC. I mean, the reason why they did it, of course, is because, well, they got to do something. The network is dying, right?
The numbers are extremely bad. I think one of the things we're going to deal with in the next couple of months is a lot of people who have had a lot of power realizing that their numbers and their salaries do not equate to power anymore. Their salaries remain high. Their viewership very low. At some point, those are going to have to come closer into parity for these media entities to exist.
Right.
And the morning shows just don't carry the same weight that they used to.
No.
John Bones Jones might have that weight.
Right.
Like, it's just Joe Rogan might have that weight. And it's going to be very disconcerting for the people who have had this power. And that's what's happening.
Yes, that's right. And Comcast is watching the situation carefully. They own MSNBC, and there's a question about whether or not they want to keep it when ratings have now plummeted by as much as 50%. They're getting something like 30-something thousand viewers for certain shows on the weekend. That's pretty grim for a national network.
You and I could go on an Instagram Live and pull up
Oh, I know. We're doing similar numbers.
Similar numbers to the demo.
Yeah, that's
in
right.
CNN viewers.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, this is the other thing, because a lot of the viewership from networks have now migrated to streaming, and in particular YouTube, podcasts on YouTube, like Getting Hammered. Want to
Getting
watch
Hammered
us?
podcast. Yeah. The other thing is, can I say?
Yeah.
Look, I'm sure Trump got a kick out of this because they have to come before him, and I don't know what he made them do.
Bend the knee.
Right, and then he'll probably make fun of them afterwards at some point because that's what he usually does.
When they turn.
However, can I say, I think there's an open question whether Trump should be gracious enough to allow people who called him Hitler for 8 years to come to his resort and hang with him, and not just name calling for him, but name calling for all of his supporters.
Oh, yeah.
Trashing everyone around him. And I just think he and Rogan in particular are so much more gracious to the people trashing them than those people give them credit for. Because Rogan was a big danger to society 2 years ago. He was trash.
Yeah.
And then
Gotta get him out of Spotify.
As soon as the cancelers decided they might need him to get reelected, they're like, oh, Kamala needs to come on the show. And he's like, sure, everyone come down and be on my podcast in Austin. And they still crapped on him because he didn't travel to her.
Right.
After they tried to ruin his life 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And this nice guy's like, I don't know, come on down. We'll just have a discussion. Trump's like, oh, did you call me Hitler? Yeah, last week? Okay, yeah, I guess come to Mar-a-Lago if you want to.
It does.
I don't know if I'd be that nice.
Make you wonder what they discussed.
Well, and how long the meeting was. Did he dismiss them forthwith?
Oh.
Two sweets?
Yeah, was there a meal? I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure that they got to eat their whole meal. That'd be my guess. Anyway, I don't think this is going to fix everything, guys. That's spoiler alert.
Yeah.
I don't think this fixes everything. Do we need to do 5 minutes on transition?
On transition?
Transition picks. See, it's confused. No, now it's confusing.
You mean the cabinet?
The cabinet.
The incoming cabinet. All right, we got a lot of people.
We do have a problem because the transition word has been sort of hijacked.
I thought you meant poor Seth Moulton's problem, which is that's another.
Can we? I don't know if we've done the update on this, but we should say briefly that Seth Moulton, a Democratic congressman from Massachusetts, was the first brave one to say hey guys, maybe dudes on women's sports teams is not a thing that regular voters like. In fact, I've looked at the polling and it's 73% against, and everybody, all sensible people are like, yeah, that makes sense. But Democratic voters mad about this, particularly in his home district.
I mean, the whole state voted for Kamala. It's a completely blue state.
Salem, Massachusetts, you heard that right? Salem, Massachusetts, there was a gathering of very angry folks to burn the witch.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Seth Moulton.
Fitting.
For speaking out about this. Also, Tufts University threatened at one point to remove his interns specifically from their academic partnership.
What are they going to do without the interns from Tufts? Which I turned down, by the way.
Plug in some SEC interns. That's
right.
what you do.
There you go.
But the backlash to Seth Moulton is indicative of how hard it's going to be to deal with this problem.
Yeah, and remember the way he couched it was that I just don't, want my little girl getting, tackled or beat up by, I think, whatever the phrase, biological men is basically what he was saying, the transgender women. And they flipped out. Yeah. And then they staged protest. How dare you? We should beat up your daughter. Is that what they were saying? I'm not really sure why they're so upset about it. So, Okay.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
All right.
Shall we do a few little cabinet updates? Lutnick, who is head of the transition team.
Yes.
To different transition. I know, it's confusing. To Commerce.
Commerce, yes.
He had reportedly wanted Treasury. There's still not a pick for Treasury.
Yeah, that's right. There are a few people in running for Treasury, but not Lutnick now.
Chris Wright to Energy.
That's
correct?
right. He's a fracking expert, energy CEO. Yeah.
You love to see it.
Yeah.
And he's got a very smart. Every sound clip you hear of this guy, every
Chris Wright.
soundbite you hear of Chris Wright, you're going to be like, oh, that guy is. He sounds like he's on it.
He's on top of it. He also has a nuclear portfolio. He's pretty smart. Yeah.
Okay. We have
Doug Burgum.
Doug Burgum got like 3 jobs. Give all the jobs to Doug Burgum. Okay. North Dakota governor, smart guy, real dude, rides horses, kills rattlesnakes, all that kind of good stuff.
Self-made millionaire.
Yes.
Billionaire.
Tech guy who's a self-made millionaire. Yeah. Fantastic dude. I'm excited. I wanted to see him on the ticket.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be the pick.
And but he has a seat, I believe, in National Security Council seat. They're also giving him an Energy Council head, and he will be Interior Department. So, Sean Duffy to Transportation.
Unfair when it's being described in certain publications as another Fox host because he's more reality star.
Reality star.
That's the other big one.
Sean Duffy is originally from Wisconsin and was one of those like lumberjack champs, competitive lumberjack champ.
Oh.
Before he was on The Real World, I believe Seattle. Was it Seattle?
I don't know.
Anyway, he wasn't
the one. He wasn't with the one with Pedro and the skate rat.
His wife was Rachel Campos Duffy.
Wow.
Was on the one with Pedro.
Really?
Real World Boston. Apologies. I should have my elderly millennial Gen X cusp card revoked for that. Yeah. At any rate, I watched Sean Duffy on The Real World. I was of that generation. He was a reality star, but then he became a lawyer, an assistant DA.
Yes.
A congressman for several terms.
A member of Congress.
He is married to Rachel Campos Duffy, who is a reality star originally from Real World San Francisco. And then
Puck, that was the guy who I was thinking of.
Puck and Pedro and Rachel. Those two got married after hanging out on Real World Road Rules Challenge. Oh, that's correct.
It was a mix of the two. Yeah, well, man, it doesn't get better than that, does it?
They are devout Catholics. They have 9 children.
They have a lot of kids,
I believe. Somebody joked that just that stat and having to move that many kids around mean that he's qualified
capable
for this.
Capable of transportation.
Look. He's been in Congress. He's a smart guy. I've liked him since his first run for Congress. I, in fact, supported him in his first run for Congress, which he and his wife, Rachel, reminded me of when I saw them at the RNC. Oh. They said when you're getting a congressional race off the ground and people are skeptical of you, they're sitting around their kitchen table doing all the work themselves, and that they got a check from me. I was like, I had nothing, but I thought it was cool that these two were getting this congressional race off the ground. And they reminded me of that. And they did, when they jogged my memory, I was like, oh, they sent me a note to say thank you. So I've liked him since then. And
I like her.
As you should. As you should. And now he's probably going to get confirmed.
I don't see why they
the last guy, Pete Buttigieg, has been giving a masterclass for 4 years in how not to be head of the Department of Transportation. So I think that Sean can learn from that.
He's probably not going to bike around as much.
Yeah. He might, like, if there's a big train disaster, he might, like, show up
He might show up to...
Yeah, like, quickly.
Okay.
Might be there. Anyway, so I like that pick. Good. That one's fun.
Good. And Brendan Carr at FCC.
Oh, yeah. So and Brian Stelter of CNN tweeted, like, this is what Brendan Carr was up to a couple months ago. And it was a tweet all about, like, how government censorship on social media was bad. And I was like, yes, Rock on, Brendan Carr.
It's so great that Brian Stelter's back on CNN. You know, I know they're making those rounds of layoffs. Thank goodness they kept him.
The names are fast and furious. And we'll see what else comes to pass. So we wrap it up for today?
Let's wrap it up. This episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Victorina Mattis.
I'm at MK Hammer on Twitter, at MK Hammer Time on Instagram. You can follow the show at Getting Hammered Podcast on Instagram or YouTube. And then let's play one last clip, which is me explaining what a Trump transition is like.
Matt Gaetz, of course, as Attorney General. That's the most controversial one. Let's start with that. Matt Gaetz.
Yeah, I think a Trump transition is like taking an edible, and for a little while you're okay, and then you're like, oh, there it is. And for me, that was Matt Gaetz.
Thanks for getting hammered responsibly. This has been a Nebulous Media Podcast.